Good evening, everybody. It is my absolute pleasure to have Mr. Mukul Deoras with us. Mukul, as a lot of you will already know, is one of the stalwarts of the FMCG industry. But for those who don't know, let me read his introduction and then we will get going. Mukul is the President Asia Pacific for Colgate-Palmolive. He's the chairman of Colgate-Palmolive India. And he's also a board member of Wyndham Hotels and Resorts. Mukul is a global business leader with 30 plus years of experience in the FMCG industry, and he brings a wealth of knowledge and experience across various aspects and approaches. He specializes in new business models and operationalizing a series of business strengthening and capability building initiatives. Prior to his current role, Mukul was actually the chief marketing officer for Colgate and was instrumental in scripting the brand purpose of Colgate's global portfolio of brands, including the flagship brand Colgate. Over the past 17 years at Colgate, Mukul has worked across multiple geographies in operational, regional, and global roles. His assignments have taken him across the world with experience in Thailand, New York, India, and Hong Kong. He began his journey at Colgate-Palmolive Thailand, a business unit he led. Post that, he moved to New York as the global head of Colgate's personal care business. Mukul is a postgraduate in management from IIM Ahmedabad. He began his career with Hindustan Unilever and has held positions in sales and marketing prior to joining Colgate. I think what is of pride to all of us is Mukul is another of our homegrown Indian talent who is now already made and is continuing to make waves on the global firmament. So very warm welcome, Mukul.
Thank you very much, Bharat. Hello, everyone. What I'm going to tell you has got nothing to do with any management consultant or any research agency or foresight agency and so on. I'm sure you've had a lot of conversations through the day on what's going to happen. I'm going to share a few thoughts and a few examples and a few beliefs that I have. And then Bharat and I, we can chat about the strange things that are happening around us and how we can get out of it and do something more and bigger. So let me start with talking about VUCA. I mean, all of you know VUCA, the volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. And if you talk about VUCA, this is really, we're living in a hyper VUCA world, and everything seems to be changing so dramatically. And if from where I sit and I see countries like India and I see countries like China and I see countries like Australia, and you see the complexity that's changing around us, there is so much of uncertainty. But the story on India is very different from the story elsewhere, and that's what I wanted to focus a little bit on. And I thought there are two things that we need to keep in mind. One, there is an underlying trend in India. And then there is a superimposition of certain turbulence that has recently happened. And we have to segregate these two, because otherwise we can mix these signals and kind of jump to conclusions which may not be absolutely correct. So to start with the underlying trend, and I still strongly believe that the fundamentals in India are very, very strong. Perhaps the strongest I see anywhere in the region, and I see so many countries. And I see even China, I see the Chinese trends, and I see the ups and downs in China. So I actually see the fundamentals are very strong. And there are various reasons. And what I'm going to tell you is not new to you at all, whether that's talking about growing income, growing consumption, multiple income families, especially down the economic strata, where the multiple income families has actually increased the per capita income, and more importantly, the disposable income that is available. Nuclearization of the family is also leading to personal consumption instead of family consumption. And also a very simple fact that we have gone beyond just measuring literacy. We are now measuring education. And when you measure education, particularly of women, that education is not equal to knowledge, but education is actually leading to confidence, and that confidence leads to consumption. And this economic confidence leads to economic independence for women as well, and that drives more self-consumption. So you see some FMCG categories which are women-oriented categories, they have seen explosive growths because of the sheer consumption drive. But you superimpose on top of that the turbulence that we are seeing right now because of what we're going through as a world in this pandemic. And I like to see this as a 2x2 matrix. And you see that there is the kind of impact that you have, which is whether it's an immediate impact or a delayed impact. And then you see whether the impact is short term or long term. And you see this 2x2 matrix. And if you start with immediate and short term, it was about fear. It's about holding back consumption. That's what happened in the beginning of last year. But if you take the same immediate impact, but over a longer period of time, we see a lot of health categories increasing. So again, an implication for FMCG is health is becoming more and more and more important for us as we go along. The other thing is about delayed impact, delayed, but which lasts only for a short period of time. One example of that is perhaps the pent-up demand that we are seeing right now. Consumption which is coming back, which is in some senses sometimes pantry filling, and in some senses it is like I missed out something, so let me consume something. So there is almost like a revenge consumption that's happening right now, which is again, I think, a short-term impact. That's not going to last for too long. But the delayed long-term impact is about, when we'll talk a little bit more about it, there is a two-speed economy that's emerging. There is one economy which is growing very rapidly and becoming richer, and there is one economy which is kind of struggling a little bit. And therefore, this two-speed economy, the impact of that is going to last a little bit longer. So that's the turbulence that we see at this point in time. But over and above all of this, there is a gear shift. And this is not short-term, this is not long-term. This is a fundamental shift in the way people consume and behave. And that is, it's tough to say it is a digital revolution. It is actually the revolution. It's not revolution. It is about accelerated evolution, because every day it changes. And every day it keeps getting different and different and different all the time. So this rapid digital evolution leading to a consumption pattern, which is more on-demand consumption, which is I get what I want, when I want, where I want, and I want it now. This kind of consumption behavior is leading to a change in the buying pattern significantly. We talk about e-commerce becoming big and so on, but that is just the beginning of the change. Driving personalized consumption is going to be very, very big. And I see that in China as well, where the personalized consumption is exploding. There are a lot of implications on the brand, and I'll talk about that in a minute or two. But what are the other implications? I think the first implication is there is a significantly different kind of value definition that's emerging in the market. So if you talk about people who are resource constrained as against people who are not resource constrained, as I said, there is a two-speed economy that is emerging, and therefore you probably get a bimodal distribution of income across in the market. And because there is a bimodal distribution, we as marketers have to address these two worlds in a very distinct way. Each of our brand has to evolve and address these worlds in a very distinct way without destroying the fabric of the brand. So you wouldn't be surprised if you have a 10 rupee pack of a brand and a 1,000 rupee pack of the same brand. And you would, in years gone by, we would have been surprised how can a brand play like that. But that's really the format in which things are happening, and they do exist, coexist simultaneously. What that means is that it has very significant impact on innovations. So the value ladder of innovation is becoming extremely important. Again, innovations have to be across price points. Innovations have to be across formats. Delivery systems become very important because delivery systems help you to deliver the price points that you are looking for. And people are expecting same experience. I'll give you an example. Let's take a shampoo sachet. That's an old example. People don't expect a different experience from a bottle and a sachet. Similarly, if a high-end skincare cream or a lipstick, whether you buy a small pack or a large pack, they don't expect different experiences. They expect the same experiences. So the value ladder becomes extremely important. But what's also behind all of this is innovation these days is not just about product. Innovation is also about experience. And it is that which is extremely important. And experience is a combination of everything, the way you deliver. In the past, our innovations in FMCG industry particularly used to be guilty of that. Was either fragmenting a line extension, so you have a variant of a variant of a variant of a variant, or you have a fragmentation of claims. I 10% more and 20% this and 50% that and so on. And that's how innovations used to be delivered at one point in time. But I think innovations have gone beyond that right now. People are seeking experience as an innovation. The product, the format, the delivery, the entire usage, the retail environment where it is sold, the way in which it is bought, the way it comes in. We talk about unboxing experience. That has become an integral part of innovation right now. Just go to the Nykaa website and just see what kind of experiences you get on that on the products, and it is so different from what you would otherwise get in a Kirana store that we used to be, or a general market store that used to sell FMCG products in the past. So the platform in which you interact with the product and buy the product have also become an experience driver. The other big thing that is happening is innovations are not just about products, but they've become kind of an augmented product. People are expecting a little bit of digital interface with the products, and it's not anymore surprise for them. And they're seeing augmentation coming through. I'll give you a couple of examples. I mean, a simple example, which is not FMCG, is about how a watch has become a health monitor also for all of us. Or even in the FMCG industry, how skin diagnostics and skincare are going hand in hand with each other. Something which is close to my business, an electric toothbrush and a diagnostics or measurement of how you perform inside the mouth is now become a commonplace in some markets. Or in some places, paints that repel insects and so on and so forth. I mean, augmented product is something that has become a reality at this point in time. I also think that people are now more demanding. The consumers are demanding not just what of an innovation, but of a why of an innovation as well. Part of this is also leading to that ingredient explosion that we see in the market. I mean, everything is ingredient and ingredient and ingredient. Oh, this is multani mitti from here, and this is saffron from there, and if it is salt from there, and so on and so forth. All kinds of explosions are happening, and ingredients are being used right now. Partly it is driven by the big wave of Ayurveda that we see in the market, but that's not here. That's not something that's going to disappear. That's I believe here to stay. I think one of the most critical changes in innovation is about how innovations are curated. I mean, gone are the days when you create a mega innovation and you launch it into the market and then hope and pray that it will succeed. Gone are the days when you put one, get into 200,000 stores or 500,000 stores distribution within 1 month, and then blast advertising at a 2,000, 5,000 GRPs and get reach and frequencies and then say, oh, it's going to work. Those things don't work anymore. It's about curation of innovations. It's about designing an innovation, probably incubating it, using perhaps a direct-to-consumer model to incubate the innovation, pivot as is required, and then scale up. This, in some senses, is going back to the old test market kind of thinking, except that those test markets used to be long drawn and had very little feedback mechanism and used to take a lot of time to see go, no go. And the ability to pivot was much, much less. But now digitization and e-commerce, and particularly D2C, has made a big change. Another big implication of what's going on is also the media. Our media and how consumers engage with media are changing dramatically. There's more personalized, more on demand, more digital, more specific targeted to the person whom you want to speak to. It's no more the target audience of all adults 15 to 45. Those kind of target audiences are very difficult and to not just implement, but also there's a lot of waste in that target audience, which we are not realizing because we can sharply focus our media much better. There is also more two-way communication between the receivers and the transmitter of the media. And then there is more to media than what we see. So, for example, the role of influencers, what used to be done by celebrities, now there are millions of micro influencers who are making a difference, and that happens because there is a two-way communication connection link between a consumer and that influencer, which never existed in the past. And our ability to create brands purely on the basis of influencers is something that is not just new, but it is here to stay. If you see what's happening in the rest of the world, whether it is in the Western world or if you go into Far East, you see Korea, you see Japan, you see China, influencers, live streaming is big business, and it's just about, it's time that it will come. And at the back of all of this is data, data, data. Data helps us to create the backbone and the spine with which we can connect with the consumers and sharply target it. So one of the big things about FMCG marketers of the future is going to be how good you are at, how comfortable you are with data. Another big change is the omni way of marketing. Omni as a world is becoming seamless, and whether you're online, offline, consumers are seamless between online and offline. Brands and marketers have to also become seamless between online and offline. That's not easy. Our organization are silos between online and offline, and it is very difficult to cut across those silos and create the bridges so that there is consistency between online and offline. But that is going to become extremely important as we determine the future of this world. Some evergreen messages like rural will continue the growth, I think, also because incomes are growing, consumption is growing, but also data consumption is growing in rural. I was told that the data consumption in rural markets is now, the growth in data consumption in rural market is far outstrips the growth in data consumption outside in rural markets. I think it's just a matter of time when logistics hurdles will be overcome, and then these rural markets will leapfrog. We haven't seen e-commerce explosion yet. It is all held back by logistics challenges. Once those challenges are unbundled, you'll see e-commerce in rural areas explode like we have never seen before. I think one of the big changes that's also happening as a result of that, and that's directly important for brands and consumer products, is fragmentation. There's so much more fragmentation of brands that is happening because the overall, I would say, the barriers to entry are coming down. That does not mean let's say the secret sauce for success is easy, but the ability of people to try is becoming cheaper and cheaper, and therefore people are going to become more eager to try out. And you see the plethora of brands that we see around us all the time, whether they are local brands, regional brands, or national brands, or even on various channels. And there are channel-specific brands that have come up, and they have been able to create a small-scale experiment with which they can decide whether this brand is going to be successful before they scale up. So the focus on brands in a situation like that will become extremely important. It does not mean there is an end for large brands. In fact, there is even more role for larger brands. But the role for the larger brands is to be aware of the guerrilla attacks that they face from smaller brands, but at the same time not move away from what you really stand for. And it is brands. Brand thinking is going to be far more important than before. And the last point I would really like to leave behind is what's going to define the winning code for marketers of the future is going to be agility. How quickly and how easily you can move on and pivot and do things differently is going to be a big call out for the future. Somebody said the other day, change is going to be always with us. And in fact, what you see as disruption of today is actually the baseline of tomorrow. So you got to get started all over again as the disruptions keep happening again and again and again. So agility and agile brands are going to be the winners of the future. So these are a few of the principles and learnings that I've had, Bharat, over the last few months, seeing and watching things happen around us, which may be lead to a few more questions and thoughts as we go along.
Sorry, I was on mute. Very, very interesting, Mukul. But, let me just take a step back. My first question to you is, we've been through this, now what we can safely call unprecedented time. What has it taught your organization? We'll come back to you, but what changes have you made as an organization, saying that, listen, if we have to continue to succeed in the future, here are the big changes we want to make. And as an organization, how did you pivot?
I think there is some pivoting and there is some reinforcing. And I think you need to do both of these. I think the first step that we had to do was to single-mindedly focus on execution, because the execution was challenged. And it's not about distribution alone. I mean, we all know distribution execution is challenging. but to be agile enough to see what do you focus on communicating to people, what is important to people at that point in time, quickly changing your media plans and quickly changing your focus behind brands in order to make sure that you are doing what you're doing. We are notorious in our planning processes as FMCG industry. We do an annual plan. Sometimes we do a 5-year plan, then we do a 3-year plan, then we do an annual plan, and then we do a quarterly media plans and so on. So we are not used to planning on a much more frequent basis. So the agility in planning was the first pivot that we had to bring about. The second pivot that we had to drive was actually increase our level of innovation and manage innovation in a very different way. Gone are the days when we could actually spend 2 years on creating an innovation. Gone are the days when you could do extended consumer tests and then decide what innovation is going to work, because it was just not feasible. But you had to innovate, and you had to innovate in a very smart manner. So how do you create a kind of a panel or a kind of a collection of highly involved consumers who can quickly respond to the innovations that you want to create, and use that to define and then experiment, and then A/B testing, which used to be something that you just read about somewhere and some management consultant would come and talk to you about, virtually became a part of life. So you had to do something, quickly read and come back. So that's another big pivot that you had to do. What that also meant was tracking of our business. Now, again, we are not good at tracking our business. We wait for the Nielsen report to come, which comes 6 weeks later, and then say, oh, my shares have gone down. Oh, my shares have gone up. So there is a smile or there's a disappointment. And there is a 6-week to 12-week lag between understanding what's going on and deciding what to do. Digital commerce actually helps you shortcut that. So your ability to throw something into the market, read what's going on, target it carefully, and then refine. All these things, new skills we had to change, and we had to learn all the time. So a lot of pivoting had to be done.
I think that's very interesting, and obviously when you have to pivot the organization and reinforce it, as you say, the biggest issue with large organizations, and even so, you and me have both worked in multinationals, it's twice as difficult to get, the elephant to lumber. What's the cultural change? How did you go about, here you are sitting atop at least Asia Pacific. How do you get fellows to do things far quicker, at times short circuit, the famous research processes? It's talk us a bit. What's the cultural change that is therefore happening in organizations, and what would you advocate?
I think the biggest reason why processes are so slow and difficult in large organizations is because there is a fear of failure, if I may be blunt about it.
Yeah.
Right. And this fear of failure makes sure, and therefore you want to make sure that your resources are focused on something that you have reasonably good guarantee of success. I think that had to change because in a situation where things were uncertain, the fear of failure had to be replaced by fear of not succeeding. And the only way you can overcome fear of not succeeding is by doing something. If you stay frozen, you will fail. And the only way you can succeed is by doing something. So the leadership lesson there was to replace that with fear of not succeeding. That's one. The second thing is you had to mentally make, and it's easy to put that down because you're pushed into a corner. The cost of failure has gone down. Actually, it has gone down. So you could actually experiment, as I was telling you earlier on, and you could take a bite-sized risk and therefore reduce the cost of failure. And because you could reduce the cost of failure, you could make the organization think about what if the cost of missing an opportunity. If the cost of missing an opportunity is much higher, then let's forget about the cost of failure and go it. But all this is theory. I think the biggest thing that we have to do as leaders in the organization, and we had to, and the Indian team and all my businesses did quite well, was actually to keep systematically asking people to identify things which are safe to try. We're not risking the bank on this one. We're not betting the bank. We're not risking the future of the company on these things. What's the worst case? Okay, let's articulate what is the worst case and say, and be prepared to write that off. Okay, I'm prepared to write off something, and now you are free to go and play around. If it sucks, if it doesn't work, you have met your objective. If it works, you have exceeded your objective. So that is the philosophy that you go ahead with on a safe to try basis. And the last thing is, you know, one of the things that because we were all remote and we still are in many places, we had to take off processes from the plate. We had to just remove those processes. We just didn't have the luxury of us having 2-day long meetings. Just didn't work. So we had no option but to take quick decisions and move on. So these are the things that helped move along a little bit.
And as you go forward, do you see a lot of this sticking?
You know what? The people in the companies have become very used to this. So any return back to the old ways is going to have a lot of resistance. And thank God for that. Thank God for that, because the worst thing would be to go back to the legacy situation, and then we will be all the things. This entire crisis would have been wasted, as they say.
Mm-hmm. No, I absolutely agree with you. In fact, I think, you know, it'll be interesting to see how many people try and crawl back into their shells, stroke cocoons, and how many embrace the new world, because I think that is going to distinguish the good from the great. But going forward,
just another observation here. There is a peer pressure amongst our people within the organization. What do I mean by that? They see agile businesses around them, and then they demand agility inside the organization, and that's good. And I think that keeps the entire team on its toes.
Wonderful. And you know, you spoke about the changing consumer, how she's changing, how she's got far more choice. Let me pivot that to, therefore, post this crisis, how do you see, you know, the FMCG organization of the future changing, be it its supply? You know, we all started, especially in multinationals, with global supply chains, 1 or 2 sources of supply. Suddenly you realize that's not a good idea anymore. This whole resilient supply chain and adaptive and, you know, agile supply chain probably calls for a different, you know, template altogether. We'll then go on to digitization and the whole pieces around data. But, you know, while you spoke about the consumer end of changes, what do you think about the back end? How do you get the back end to change?
Oh, the back end has to change a lot. And most companies, most global companies are thinking about how they can adapt their supply chain to the changes that we are seeing right now. Because whether it has got to do with the pandemic or whether it has got to do even with the logistics challenges that we are facing right now, and you see that happening much more frequently outside India than you see inside India, actually. The sheer challenges of shipping and logistics and the ability to service a market is becoming very, very difficult right now. So you will see a lot more, as you rightly said, resilient supply chain coming up. But more importantly, I think scale was the driver of supply chain at one point in time. I think speed and flexibility will be the driver of supply chain of the future. There is absolutely no question about that. And I think the scale is an overplayed attribute, honestly. We have seen that the scale advantage is a few percentage points. Yes, when it is a commodity market, scale advantage helps. But when we are talking about branded markets, scale advantages are those which are not necessarily the ones that you will desperately hold on to and give up agility and flexibility for that. But the implication for the marketing team and brand teams as a result of that is their connection with supply chain has to become much stronger than what it has been in the past. Because as you become more flexible and as you become more agile, it is not it takes two to tango. It is not the supply chain alone that can dance on this one. There needs a partner, and that partner is the brand team, and they have to dance along with them to make sure that there is they do it in tandem in a sense. So that's going to become big demand requirement of the teams of the future.
I think that is very well put. I just think, you know, if somebody had told us 18 months back that worldwide shipping will be disrupted the way it is, commodity and, you know, raw material stroke feedstock stroke packaging is going to be at the prices. all
Right.
supply chain guys would have been laughed out of the room and said, have you seen the last 10 years data? And,
Right.
here we are sitting now
Right.
trying to just manage costs, forget demand. You can't get, ships into ports.
Yeah, the blank sailing is killing everyone right now across the world, and it is very fascinating. And there are a few reports which you may want to take a look at. That the demand spike is probably 4-5%. It's not that there is 100% increase in demand. Yeah, but the resultant impact on the disruption on supply chain and logistics is like as if demand is multiplied by 2x or 3x. And that's because the supply chain was designed very rigid. There are lanes. I mean, we talk about lanes in shipping. I mean, I'm sure you're aware of that. There are lanes, and lanes have to be managed. Things happen only through lanes. And if you're not in the lane, nothing will happen. Now, these are the kind of things that just went out for a toss as the world changed. So flexibility is the name of the game.
Wonderful. And now, overlay digital. I mean, digital, of course, currently, in the good old days, I used to say innovation and rural marketing are the two most misused words in FMCG. Soon, digitization is going to become the third because it's the panacea for everything. But having said that, I mean, talk about how, FMCG organizations, how do they turn digital now into a competitive advantage rather than just desperately trying to keep pace?
Yeah. So again, you call it bhed chal, right? The entire the herd is flocking towards digitization. And then we started with one single measure of digitization. What percentage of your media budget is digital? Give me a break. That's the worst indicator that you can have if you talk about percentage of digitization. And it's got nothing to do with what fraction of your budget you spend on digitization. The challenge of digitization is you can end up spending all kinds of money all over the place without even knowing whether you're doing it right or not right. And before you realize, you can get caught with that, oh my God, I'm not being digital. And therefore, let me just spend as much as I can on digital media. And then we compromise our reach frequency of our basic business as a result of that. A judicious combination of the two is important. And digital, you must understand what is the role of digital. The role of digital is actually in three folds. First, the role of digital is to help us target correctly and to identify whether that targeting is working or not working. And once you identify that the targeting is working, you can then do lookalikes through non-digital media and then explode that reach through non-digital media with more assurance that it will have a positive impact. The good thing about digital is that you can actually read the full funnel. Right down from the top of the funnel to the conversion, you can see everything and you can see what works and what does not work and create hypothesis and then explode that beyond the digital format. So I think that's the first and the most important thing about digital. And I think that's where marketers should start from. The second thing about digital is it allows you to target some of the brands in a more efficient manner, because otherwise you would have spread yourself thinly across various target segments. So you could, for example, we've just, and I'm giving you my company example because I'm familiar with that one, but there could be plenty of examples like that. We've launched a toothpaste which is meant for diabetics. Now, there's no point in doing a national television advertising for 1.3 billion people when your total target audience is, let's say, 50 million or 60 million people alone, and the topmost target audience is probably 10 billion people. So if you can somehow or the other target it much better, then you can narrow your focus and you can be far more efficient and therefore get much better return on your investment. That's another one. And I think the third one that is going to explode as we go along is the entire linkage between the digital engagement and the e-commerce transaction. Now, e-commerce transaction will keep improving. And as e-commerce transaction keeps improving, there is a digital funnel that needs to lead to that e-commerce transaction that people will have to get very comfortable with. So one of the things that the marketing people will have to become more comfortable with is be accountable for sales. And that's counterintuitive for marketing people that, I have a sales target. that I need to deliver a sales target by the week, by the month, by the quarter, and that sales target is on how much of my traffic I'm able to drive towards conversion and be able to deliver an e-commerce sale, is something that is going to be extremely important. Now, if you think that if you compartmentalize these as the roles of digital, then there is a meaningful role that will happen. It will never ever say that this is the only thing that we need to do.
I think that is very well put. In fact, it reminds me of the, wheel going full circle. And I remember when you and me all started our careers, we would all start in sales. I remember my initial days in Western UP as a young sales fellow. I think some of those experiences are invaluable.
Yeah, I remember that. I was in West UP as well as a salesman. My
Oh,
first day as a
wonderful.
salesman. Yeah, so yeah.
So, but going on, you spoke about this whole area of digital, and the one thing that has happened, which is now the most fashionable term, is the D2C brand. And we've seen some good successes. We've seen the wonderful thing is the FMCG industry, not just in India, but across the world, which was normally the preserve of the large fellows, almost pretty much 3/4 of the growth is now coming from these new challenger brands. Here are these brands which are looking after a niche or a little bigger than a niche, but they're very focused. They have a purpose and they're going strong. Now, what is your advice to the D2C market here? Because suddenly barriers have come down, but more importantly to the other organizations to, how do they adapt to this new reality? Because you're going to have people coming at you from all ends.
Yeah. I mean, D2C is a phenomenon which is great and scary at the same time. Why do I say that? It is great because it targets people very carefully and correctly. And it narrows itself so that you are absolutely clearly delivering what is required to a particular consumer. It's scary because honestly, to create scale out of D2C and make it viable is a very, very, very difficult task. And many people have suffered. Now, it is not a surprise that most of the DTC businesses are also startup businesses. And a lot of the D2C businesses are also in the process of getting more funding. Now, this is a little bit maybe not maybe too harsh a statement to be made, but valuation drives D2C for a large number of D2C businesses. Whereas long-term sustainability is value creation, not valuation. And that's why big businesses and big companies are not so good at creating D2C brands. It is very difficult to justify a D2C brand and say that I'm going to lose money forever. And I'm not, because we're not going to sell that business to somebody else. And if you're not going to sell that business to somebody else, then it has to become profitable at some stage. So the D2C as a business has to be very carefully managed. And if I may be forthright on this one, there will be a shakeout on this one. And the real meaningful D2C businesses will survive. What are the two criteria that are required for D2C businesses to survive? One, there is a meaningful need that is being addressed, which is not being serviced by somebody, or there's a really opportunity or gap that you exist in the market. And the second important thing is there is a transaction value which is large. That is absolutely critical for a D2C business, because if the transaction value is not large, then the cost of servicing a D2C model is very, very high, and the viability is suspect. So if I were a D2C business, my advice to them would be just make sure that you have a real good reason why people should buy you, and that will drive both traffic and the top end of the funnel into you. But more importantly, it will create a viable transaction so that you can service that business. And if possible, and not always possible, so that this is only if possible, you should think about a long-term value of that business. It is not always possible. So if you justify businesses only on the basis of long-term value, I think you are heading into a failure. I think you need to justify the business that the cost of the margin on the transaction must exceed the cost of acquisition to start with. And if or at least there should be a window of hope that you're going to do that one. If you believe that no, only after I get the 10th repurchase that I'm going to make money out of this person because my cost of acquisition or retargeting is going down, and that's why people will buy. Guess what? fundamentally, consumers' behavior is not going to change just because you are D2C. Remember, there is, I don't know whether you've come across this book called How Brands Are Built. That's by Byron Sharp. And he talks about the fact that the entire basket of consumers is a leak. The bucket of consumers is a leaky bucket. You'll always keep losing people. So to build a business purely on the hope of repeat purchase is actually very, very difficult. You need to build a business based on penetration and trial.
Yeah, and I think world over the data shows that long-term marketeers, it makes far more sense to concentrate on penetration than to look at a set of buyers who will keep buying your product. I think the data is, but in the meantime, Mukul, we have a lot of questions coming in from the audience. Let me at least try and pick up some of them. I don't think we can get to all. The first question is, in your vision of a two-speed economy, how rapidly do you see Bharat catching up with India? How can the government ensure parity between the two while maintaining the interests of multiple socio-economic groups?
I think my view is Bharat will catch up pretty quickly, but in a very different way. Okay, so Bharat and India's consumption, the consumption baskets will look very different, but the consumption increase and the consumption growth will be very, very rapid between Bharat and India. So Bharat will become just equally as big and as equally important as India is. We all get enamored with India, but there is a bigger Bharat sitting behind. And I think if I were a smarter marketer, I would be focusing on the Bharat of this world, because that will change faster. And some smart person will see that change and will be able to do things very differently. The solutions of Bharat are very different. So if you ask me, the future is the Bharat.
Very well put. I couldn't agree more. The next question says, how can brands which are known for traditional Indian products excel and outcompete MNCs?
It's got nothing to do with MNC or non-MNC. People, when you buy, you don't buy just because it's an MNC product. You buy a product just because you believe that product gives you something, delivers you something, and you trust somewhere. As long as you have a differentiated product, look at Pidilite. Look at what you see behind Bharat's screen. Now you think that's an MNC product? It's one of the best brands in India. Most trusted, most reliable, most valued, most loved brand in this. It's got nothing to do with where it comes from. It comes from the belief that brands need to address what the business needs and what the consumers need. And as long as you can deliver that, you have a differentiated. Again, go back to the book, Byron Sharp's book on how brands grow. It's a terrific book. If you have not read it, just go and I'm not being paid to publicize that book. Sorry, sir, I'm not saying that, but it's one of the most inspiring books I have read. And they keep talking about the fact that you need physical availability and mental availability, and you need distinctive assets which can help you build both physical and mental availability. If you have these three things which are very sharply focused on a consumer need, you have a brand. That's important.
Fascinating. He says we're an Indian namkeen snacks major and one of our localized product lines isn't doing well overseas beyond the NRI audience. Is it all about bringing in new talent or redefining the brand? I think the answer, go ahead, Mukul.
No, I think talent is required to redefine the brand, but it is about brand.
Absolutely about brand. And my simple advice, I don't know which namkeen this is. Listen, when Sachin Tendulkar goes abroad, he doesn't become, Joe Root or somebody else. He remains Sachin, but he adapts to those pitches. And I mean, frankly, it is about your brand adapting to the new pitches and not trying to be who it is in India. But I think this is worthy of a larger conversation, but I've got far many more questions. When you look at FMCG D2C in the future, do you visualize the logistics delivery function being outsourced to tech-based companies such as various names, Delivery, Shiprocket and the likes? How important will scaling in-house capability be in this new future?
Again, that's got nothing to do with FMCG. It's got to do with the business strategy that you want to have as a company. Whether it is something is it a competitive advantage that you need to build and retain, or is it something that is best outsourced? And it all depends on what your business model is. If you see empirical examples around the world, people have outsourced this, because this is not the core competence of the businesses that are focused on building brands. When you're focused on building brands, you are making, unless the delivery is a part of the brand, the delivery experience is a part of the brand, in which case you need to in-house it. I mean, look, Domino's Pizza. All right. I mean, the delivery experience in itself is a part of the brand. And if the delivery experience goes bad, then your impression of the brand goes bad. So I think unless it is integral to your business, let's say if you are into a durable where servicing is important or installation is important or something like that, I would be very surprised if brands would get caught up with logistics themselves.
Fair. The next question says, as we evolve and adapt to a post-COVID socially distanced world, how would you advise brands to create a multi-sensory experience in the future? For instance, deploying AI, VR, etc. Any examples from Colgate/Pidilite?
I'm sure Pidilite has a lot of examples. You know what, the beauty of consumption is that most of our businesses and brands, our consumption is private, even though the COVID has got social distances. So we still brush our teeth all alone. It doesn't matter how distant you are. We still apply our shampoos and consume our health drinks and food. Food is sometimes social, but everything else is pretty private. Now, the question about AI and VR, these two are very different things. Artificial intelligence is all about how do you make sense out of a set of seemingly disconnected points and disconnected data points and disconnected pieces of information, and is there a replicable behavior that can be predicted out of that one, whether it is artificial insemination for sales forecasting or a consumer behavior forecasting and so on. And that's here to stay, because it allows you to create an ability to go beyond the human brain and then be able to create a solution which it's very difficult for us to imagine. So, and more importantly, continuously keep improving that solution. The virtual reality part is going to be extremely important, and a combination of AI and virtual reality. I'll give you an example. We have a toothbrush, which is an electronic toothbrush, which is connected digitally to your phone, and you can even connect it to your cloud data, and you can get it whatever you want. Well, you can see how well you are brushing, which part you have brushed, which part you have not brushed, why have you not brushed, where are you missing some certain spots. And we now have one which has got even a camera installed, so you can see whether there's a plaque buildup happening somewhere and the plaque is being removed or not being removed. All of this is an artificial intelligence, because it is picking up signals, converting that signals into data, and then data is creating some meaningful assessment out of that one. And then there is a virtual reality that you can create out of that in case what kind of movements are necessary in order to create that kind of a product experience. All of this is now just a matter of time when it will become an integral part of some of our products. I mean, we all wear Fitbits and we all wear all kind of devices around us all the time anyway. And the Fitbit is also an artificial intelligence system, which is telling us what to do and what not. But maybe you have a better example of Pidilite.
No, I completely, to my mind, I think in the end, what you spoke about in your initial remarks about innovation finally being about a delightful consumer experience rather than a delightful consumer product. And therefore, I mean, for example, if the consumer is doing something around waterproofing, finally what you're selling him is a leak-free home. It doesn't, you're not selling him a product or a set of products, so on and so forth. And you're selling him the experience from going from a leaking home to a non-leaking home. And therefore, there is a role, obviously, for AI, there's a role for virtual reality, both of these things. But I think this point is well made. Let's go to the next question. I'm conscious we have lots of questions flowing in. Do you think that enabling digital inclusivity for all users who are less technologically savvy or otherwise physically challenged should be a key part of a revamped customer experience?
I think yes, but it's not easy. But I think it's not possible for a single brand to create the digital inclusivity that is required. But a collection of brands together and the collection of how you delight a consumer through your digital inclusivity will actually make the movement, and even tech savvy people will also become inclusive. I mean, when there is a need, there is a way. People are able to find the way to use a phone for people who had never knew even to do any kind. You tell them that this is the most complex computer that they have ever seen in their lives, but it just happens to look like a mobile phone. they won't even believe you, but they're easily able to navigate that. So I think it all depends on user experience, and the more you make your user experience exciting, delightful, easy, the more inclusivity will happen on its own. It is not something that can be legislated or say that, okay, you need to spend X percentage of your money on digital inclusivity. No, you need to make sure that your user experience is very delightful. And once it is, it will just happen on its own.
No, absolutely. And, along with this comes the democratization of data, with data being so reasonable. I mean, I was struck by a taxi driver, who was in another state, but his state was going in for an election and he had all the data. And I said, how do you know all this? And he said, sir, मैं YouTube को रात को मैं सबके सब भाषण सुनता हूँ, then I decide. And this is the changed world. I mean, it's not a coincidence that political parties are, so now savvy on social media.
They are the savviest users of data. I can tell you that. They used to always be, except that the data was analog at one point in time, or it was based on assumptions. People knew that this constituency is like that and that constituency is like that. They had a feel for that. Now they have data for that, and they're more precise.
There's a very interesting question. This one will resonate with you, Mukul. How can we ensure the C-suite buy-in for enabling an organization structure free of silos, which isolates e-commerce, merchandising, store operations, supply chain, and marketing, that can interrupt CX? And this is coming from a mid-management executive. I mean, I'm sure he or she is feeling the pain somewhere.
I think everyone is feeling the pain. And it's I can tell you that it is not just the mid-management which is feeling the pain. The C-suite is also feeling the pain, because they see the sluggishness and the slowness of the organization, and the smart C-suite is actually seeing that they themselves are probably cause of this slowness of the organization. So it starts with a bit of introspection amongst the C-suite people, and those who are on C-suite listening to this conversation would probably identify themselves with this one, where sometimes we are the slowest link, the slowest part of the entire chain that is moving ahead. And I think this entire thing about letting go, empowerment, these are big words, and very, very difficult to execute. And I think one of the biggest challenges as leaders you have is when you empower people, you have to trust. That's the core of empowerment. And when you have to trust people, you have to let go of your own power. Remember, there is somebody said the other day that the total power in the organization is constant. It just depends on how you distribute it. You keep everything to yourself, there is no empowerment. If you empower something, you have to disempower someone. So it cannot be, we have to let go. It is easier said than done. And I really appreciate this question because time and time again, we see that there is a part of the organization which is tugging and pulling the rest of the organization, and the rest of the organization is still, this is what made us successful in the past, and therefore this is what will continue to make us successful in the future. We're still stuck in that a little bit. There is no easy 1, 2, 3 solution on this one, except to say that humility of accepting this at the top of the organization is the only way change can happen.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think some point of time we have to realize that there is not one driver in the car, but all of us are in the same car, and the driver has to change at different points of time. Right. Please don't get off the car when you think your driving job is done. Stay in the car, and be gracious enough to hand over the steering wheel when necessary to somebody else.
Correct.
Absolutely. You will like this next question. I think this is right now become a buzzword. Should post-COVID product service innovation in companies remain linked to ROI-based outcomes, or should it include broader social objectives as well? Your views, please. With this whole talk around purpose-filled brands and brands with purpose, what is your view?
Yeah, I think the fact that brands have to create a world which is better and a future that is better is going to become even more important. We do not have the luxury, nor it will be very irresponsible for businesses to completely disregard the impact that it is going to have on the social environment and the people around us. So it's not about being compelled to do it, but it has to proactively and embrace it as a part of its persona, as a part of its ethos. I mean, it's like you talk about equal pay to people, you talk about rights for people to work, a right for people to live in an environment, and no brand, no product, no industry has the right to destroy the environment. Is something that we have to learn and be a part of all the time. Now, the question is the more important question, or equally important question. There is, therefore, what is the role of an ROI? Okay, and therefore, is ROI important, or we just need to sacrifice ROI for the sake of this? And this goes back to the basic theory of economics. I mean, profit is important. Without profit, there is no economic. There is no sustenance of investments. There is no sustenance of even enterprise, and therefore progress, and therefore innovation. Profit is integral to the way human life and human beings have created and lived, and it is and progressed over the years. So ROI will continue to be important, and the businesses will have to, unfortunately, find the right balance between ROI and the responsibility that they have to deliver to the society around them. It is not either or at all, but responsible ROI will become very important.
Absolutely. In my view, corporate companies are also like citizens, and they have an equal responsibility for the environment that they A, live in, B, work in, and C, hopefully actually put back into. So
absolutely,
I think very well put. In the interest of time, I'll squeeze in one last question. We have many more questions, Mukul, so you can see that you're resonating with a lot of people. But this is an interesting one. It says, is COVID a death knell for one-size-fits-all brand campaigns? Your views?
One-size-fits-all brand campaigns.
Is COVID a death knell?
Yeah, so one-size-fits-all brand campaign were a death knell in themselves, even earlier, before COVID. If you think that there is one solution, you can unleash it upon people, and once and for all, everyone will buy into it, because that's the monopolistic situation where you have one size fits all. Yeah, I will make you can have as whatever color that you want, as long as it's black. One size fits all. That is never was successful, never will be successful. COVID has just made it a little more exaggerated and in your face, maybe, but it's not just COVID. Even before COVID, you can see in the last 10 years, you'll see the way brands have become far more sharper in the way they are delivering. It is just not, those days are gone, when there was no competition, when there was monopolistic behavior, and there was one thing that could work and nothing else. That's not going to, that never was, and that never will be.
Absolutely. Thanks. We can go on, Mukul. I must say, it has been A, insightful, B, very interesting. We can probably chat on for an hour.